What's the time here? Okay, it's not showing. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, watching me from different countries across the world. This is Blackwood Fire Network, and my name is INNOSSETU. Today is a Friday, like I always say. Weekend begins on Friday. Um, Hope you guys you're doing good, and of course, for those in Kenya, sorry, a lot of floods, a lot of rains, but of course, there are a lot of floods that have claimed a lot of people have died in Kenya because of floods. But in Uganda, it is of course 11 minutes past 2 p.m. Yeah, it's 11 minutes past 2 p.m. But if you're watching me from Facebook, Blackwood Fire Radio Station, and YouTube, Blackwood Fire Network 2, and of course Twitter, Blackwood Fire Network or Blackwood Fire Net 1. Endeavor to like and follow our pages as well as of course subscribing to our YouTube channels, different YouTube channels that are related to Blackwood Fire Network family. Today's topic is a bit interesting, and of course we we know that sorry. Yeah, that is rainy season. It rained at night. It is if I can look through the window now, I see outside it is cloudy, but that is the season of rain when it comes to rain in Africa. Yes, today's topic is a bit interesting. Uh, yes, uh, in Africa we depend too much on environment. When you look at everything that surrounds man in Africa is of great and great value to his life. So, today's topic is, of course, I'm going to talk about environmental problems in Africa, the entire Africa. We see a lot of problems in like coming out today, but they might be caused by, of course, some misuse of the environment that we do. The misuse of environment. Yes, we see rains, flooding. After flooding, we may even experience drought, because whenever it rains too much, we expect drought. But what is the cause? It's because we sabotage with environment. So, um, uh, African environmental issues or problems are caused by human impacts on the natural environment and affects humans and nearly all forms of life, including man. So, issues include deforestation, soil degradation, air pollution, water pollution, garbage pollution, climate change, water scarcity resulting in problems with access to safe water, supply, and sanitation. So these issues result in environmental conflict and are connected to broader social struggle for democracy and sovereignty. So, talking about deforestation in different African countries, um, we see that the large scale felling of trees and of course the resulting of course decreases in forest areas are the main environmental issues of the African continent. So rampant clearing of forests and land of course conversion goes on for agriculture, settlement, and fuel needs. 90% of the Africa's population requires wood to use as fuel for heating and cooking. As a result, forested areas are decreasing daily, as for example in the region of equatorial evergreen forests. We see that um, Africa's desertification rate is twice that of the world. So, the rate of illegal logging, which is another main cause of deforestation, varies from country to country, such as 50% in Cameroon and 80% in Liberia. So, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, deforestation is primarily caused by the needs of the poor citizens along with the unsupervised logging and mining. And in Ethiopia, the main cause uh, is the country's growing population, which induces an increase in agriculture, livestock production, and of course, fuel wood. Low education and little government intervention also contributes to deforestation. We see that Madagascar's forest loss is partially caused by citizens using slash and burn techniques after, of course, independence from the French in 2005. We see Nigeria had the highest rate of in 2005. Sorry, we see that Nigeria had the highest rate of deforestation in the world, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations (FAO). Deforestation in Nigeria caused by logging, substance agriculture, and the collection of wood for fuel, according to the GIFI, deforestation has wiped out nearly 90% of Africa's forests. So, West Africa only has 22% of the moist forest left, and 81 of Nigeria's old growth forest disappeared within 15 years. So deforestation also lowers the chance of rain and drought because of this deforestation. So 98% of the Ethiopia's forest has disappeared over the last 50 years. Within 43 years, Kenya's forest coverage decreased from about 10% to 1.7% to of course to 1.7%. So deforestation in Madagascar has also led to desertification, soil loss, and water source degradation, resulting in the country's inability to provide necessary resources for its growing population. So, in the last 5 years, we see Nigeria has lost nearly half of its primary forest. So, Ethiopia's government, along with organizations like, of course, Farm Africa, is starting to take steps to excessive deforestation, but this is too much. Of which, like a lot of countries are going through, of course, um, are going through A lot of countries are going through desertification. Geno Mosquito. Hello, Seto. How are you doing? Very early today. Yeah. Yes, Geno. How are you doing, Geno Mosquito? Yes, today I'm very early. We are early here. Whenever we let time to go in the evening, you may find out that in the evening power is off. That's why we are here very early. Yeah, I tried it. We tried it yesterday to come early, and in the whole evening, electricity was off. So we try to come early so that we can't be affected by the electricity, because I'm saying it like it wants to rain again. So power may be off in the near time to come. So that's why I'm very early here, Geno Mosquito. But you're welcome on our live, Geno Mosquito. Let me hope you're doing good. I don't know what is time there, because it is here in Uganda. It is exactly 20 minutes past 2 in Uganda. Just 20 minutes past 2. Yeah. Whenever we like come a bit late, electricity tries to do its own shit. That's why we today we have managed to, of course, try to come early here. Let me hope everything is moving on well, Geno Mosquito. So we see that deforestation is an issue, and of course, forests are important in Africa as populations have relied heavily on them to provide basic needs. Woods are used for shelter, clothing, agriculture elements, and much more. So, woodland supplies are also used to create medicines and wide variety of food. So some of these food include fruits, nuts, honey, and much more. So wood is crucial for economic gain in Africa, especially in developing countries. We see that forests also help the environment. It is estimated that the green belt of Africa contains over 1.5 million species of trees. Without the forest, of course, habitat to protect the species, the population are at risk. So the livelihoods of millions of people and species are at the risk with the deforestation. The act is, of course, the domino effect that affects multiple aspects of community, ecosystem, and economy. Many African nations have begun to implement restoration projects to reverse of course, the effects of deforestation. These projects have been shown to improve the environment in many ways and livelihood of the people living near them. For example, we see that there are more other problems, more other environmental issues we see in Africa today that are affecting Africa as a continent, because uh, even the once deserts had they once had forests. The deserts we see in Africa, they once had forests. So it's not it is a very serious and a serious issue uh, in Africa. When we talk about the environment, this tackles a lot, and a lot of people have, of course, are not focusing so much on environment. Like you find people Chinese allowed to, of course, to settle in swamps. You see them constructing apartments in swamps, which is extremely dangerous to the environment. Well, if it rains when the swamps are occupied already, water creates its own way within the community, within the people. So another issue, we see that soil degradation, the erosion caused by rains, rivers, and winds, as well as um, overuse of soils for agriculture and low use of manures, have resulted in turning the soil infertile. As for example, in the plains of the Nile and the Orange River, a main cause of soil degradation is lack of manufactured fertilizers being used. So, since African soil lacks organic sources of nutrients, and also dumping of plastic waste such as polythene bags, broken plates, basins, water drums, plastic water bottles, and jerry cans on the soils. The increase in population has also contributed when people need to crop. So, as a source of income, but known to take measures to protect the soil. So, due to low income, the current methods create too much pressure on other environmental aspects, such as forests, and are not, of course, sustainable. There are also ecological causes of course, poor soil quality. Much of soil has rocks, clay stuff, but we see dumping plastics wherever, dumping plastics everywhere, but dumping basins in soil, broken bottles, polythene bags. This has resulted into soil degradation in Africa, and these are actually the causes of famine we see in Africa. A lot of people, however much we see modernity in Africa, we see people trying to forge around live in cities in Africa, but majorly the biggest population of Africans live in villages, of which they depend on subsistence farming, they depend on agriculture, they depend on cattle rearing. This is what they depend on. But we see a lot of people, we see a lot of polyphenols. Actually, it is Rwanda within East Africa, the country I know where they banned polythene bags. You can't put polythene bags wherever you want in Rwanda. If you like you're big headed, you are arrested for dumping, for tackling with the environment. However, we see a lot of environmental issues still in Rwanda, but they don't use buveras. Hey, sorry, they are called buveras. Polythene bags are called buveras in my language. So you don't see polythene bags in Rwanda. So if at all we can see, Rwanda can act as an example to other African countries to also adopt such measures of course protecting nature, protecting the environment. Secondly, we see that uh, lack of course degradation is of course the improper management of waste, lack of facilities and techniques to handle waste lead to dumping of waste in soil, therefore cause soil degradation by the process such as leaching. So degradation of African soil causes decreased food production. When you look at, and by the way, funny enough, all the wastes we see that are collected within the city, I see trucks taking those wastes in the villages. They find a certain place in the village and dump that. This is dangerous. So, damaging ecological effects and overall decrease in the quality of living in Africa. So, the issue would lessen if fertilizers or other cropping supplies were more affordable, that's used more. Another problem we see, another environmental issue in Africa is about air pollution. And most of the places that are polluted are from industries, of which industries are not even for Africans. The industries we see, are not African industries. The industries we see, which are of course causing this degradation. So, air pollution. The air in Africa is greatly polluted due to multiple reasons. We see that the primitive method of farming that takes place in most areas in Africa is certainly, of course, a casual factor. We see that over 1.3 million hectares of land are being lost annually due to, of course, agriculture, grazing, uncontrolled panning, and fuel wood consumption. So, combustion of wood and charcoal are used for cooking. Are used for cooking, and this results to a release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which is a toxic pollutant in the atmosphere. Also, due to the poor supply of the power, so most homes have to rely on fuel and diesel in generators to keep their electricity running. So air pollution in Africa is coming to the forefront and must not be ignored. For example, in South Africa, the mercury levels are severe due to, of course, coal combustion and gold mining. So mercury is absorbed from the is absorbed from the air into the soil and water. So the soil allows the crops to absorb the mercury, which humans ingest directly. So animals eat the grass, which has absorbed the mercury, and again humans may ingest these animals. So fish absorb the mercury from the water. Humans are also ingest the fish and drink the water that have absorbed the mercury. So this increases the mercury levels in humans, and this can cause serious health issues. It causes serious health issues. So it is expected that, of course, Africa could represent the half of the world's population pollution emission by, of course, 2030. So we see that along with many other countries in sub-Saharan Africa, is experiencing a fast increase in pollution derived from many causes such as burning wood, like I said, for cooking, openly burning of waste, traffic, agric food, and chemical industries. So the dust from the Sahara carried by the winds through the Sahel area, all this reinforced by the greater population growth and urbanization. So we see that there is a need to intervene when more than one third of the total disability adjusted life years. So uh, we see that in many countries in Africa, the use of leaded gasoline is still widespread, and vehicle emission controls are a non-existent. So, indoor air pollution is widespread, mostly from the burning coal in the kitchen for cooking, compounds released from fuel stations, and nitrogen, and of course, hydrocarbon gases released from airports cause air pollution. Carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the air causes an increase of people with respiratory issues. We find a lot of we find someone is young, we find the kids suffering from respiratory issues. Someone has never smoked, someone has never smoked weed, someone has never smoked cigarette, but is suffering from internal from respiratory issues. So there is a common relationship between air pollution and, of course, population. Africa's widely diverse between areas that are overpopulated versus areas that are scarcely populated. Of course, in regions where there are little industrial development and a few people, air quality is high, and the vice versa. In densely populated and, of course, industrialized regions, the air quality is low. So, addressing the air pollution in big cities is often a big priority, even though the continent as a whole produces little air pollutants by international standards. Even so, air pollutants are causing a variety of health and environmental problems. So these pollutants are, of course, a threat to the population of Africa and the environment they try so hard to sustain. Um, we see that in 2000 and I think 2019, air pollution killed over 1.1 million people across Africa. That is a study that, of course, that is was a research that was conducted, and more than 350 million African children live in households that use solid fuels, mostly wood and coal for cooking and heating. So the emissions from these solid fuels are the main causes of indoor air pollution. Good settle. Yes, Jibjaba. Hello, Jibjaba. Let me hope you're doing good. Yesterday, yesterday I got lost from nowhere. That's why today I was like, let us come early. Let us come early here, because whenever we push to evening, you may find out that in the evening electricity goes off. On is ever on and off. That's is not stable. So that's why today that I was like, no, let us go early today. Let us work early so that we are not, of course, sabotaged by the electricity issues. But let me hope you're doing good. For me, I'm fine. I'm loud and clear. Though outside here, I'm seeing clouds. It's like it wants to rain. It was raining the whole night. Last evening, it was raining. But I'm seeing clouds out like it wants to rain. But I'm doing good. Yeah, pollution is a problem, but climate change crisis is a is a hoax. Trojiba. That is true. Yeah, yeah, true. Now, if we, when we look at Kenya, our neighbors here, our immediate neighbors here, even if you shout from Uganda, people from Kenya can hear you. They are going through a lot. A lot of people are dying. It like at the beginning of these rains at this season, like the governments did not actually take this as a serious issue, but it is affecting a lot of people. A lot of people have died in floods in Kenya. A lot of people have died in floods. A lot of people have been recorded taken by water. Besides water, a lot of diseases are coming out from these floods. So climatic changes, it is also another big issue. I don't know whether there are measures for climatic change, because of course climatic changes are caused by environmental disorders. Most of the climatic changes are caused by environmental disorders, I guess. Most of the climatic changes we see, they are caused by environmental disorders. You tackle with the environment, climate changes, because we have seen areas where a lot of forests have been cut down, and those areas are experiencing desertification. And when it rains in those areas, it is worse. It is worse. So, um, climatic change, like GB Jabba said, we see that climatic change in Africa is an increasingly serious threat, as Africa is among the most vulnerable continents to the effects of climatic change. Some sources even classify Africa as the most vulnerable continent on Earth. So climatic change and climatic, of course, variability will likely reduce agricultural production, food security, and water security. As a result, there will be negative consequences on people's lives and, of course, sustainable development in Africa. Now, let's look at the floods that Kenya is experiencing now. Who's working now? A lot of people are going through a lot of things. People are not working. People like people's gardens have been cleared. People's cattle has been swept by the floods. So it is a serious issue. Climatic, it is a serious issue. We can't see development where we see um, yeah, right governments and scientists tamper with the environment is not a natural occurrence. Yeah, yeah, governments and scientists tamper with the environment. Now, leaving alone Africa, let's look at UAE. Let's look at Dubai. Recently, they wanted to make rain, and of course, blown those chemicals to the air to get rains. When rain came, it came in huge amounts. So, and these people, they call themselves to be knowing a lot of things. Remember the time we had eclipse last month on 8th. It actually it had even been written down that scientists are going to do an experiment on the eclipse. Over which experiment? So I don't know whether these people they study much about the effects, the consequences of these experiments they do. We have seen a lot of African governments setting out forests, setting out timber. They say it is illegal to cut timber. Like in Uganda, it is illegal. It is illegal to just cut timber like the way you want. But we see those people that cut timber, they are guarded by the army. Those people that cut down forests, they are guarded by the army. And they are cutting out natural forests, not man-made forests, natural forests, not planted forests, sorry. They are guarded by by the army, of which the army is the government. So uh, we see that Over the coming decades, warming from climate change is expected across almost all African surface. The global mean rainfall will increase, just like what we are seeing in Kenya and in Uganda. By the way, in Uganda it is also raining. However, we have not experienced serious floods like the case in of course in our brother country Kenya. But we are also experiencing a lot of rains, and it rains every day. It rains every day. It make it rain. Didn't know that UAE created rain. Boy, they fed up a big time. Yeah, these people, these people, these people in Dubai, they created their own rain. I was seeing them carry. They were carrying chemicals like they're like clouds. Chemicals are like clouds. Let me see here. Those chemicals are like clouds. They look like clouds. Yeah, there were certain videos circulating how these people were carrying those uh, uh, carrying carrying those rains. Was a certain video for chemical clouds these people used to make rain. I think it is Keith who sent me that video, which these people are using. This Keith, I mix rain artificial. Let me try to look at that video. I think it is Keith who sent me that video when these people were they were like cloud stuff. They were like clouds. I don't know how they're called. But I think Keith shared me that video. Uh, when cars were carrying those stuffs that are like clouds, they were very white. They were carrying them. Then they blew them to the atmosphere. Then rained for 3 days. Yeah, I'll tell Keith to share for me that video again. But when those people uh, were making it is called cloud seeding. It's called cloud seeding. Cloud seeding. Maybe these people deleted those things, but they were carrying things that were like yeah, cloud seeding is happening in the States too. You will see planes spraying the trails in the sky. Chemical trails chemical trails is the term. Yeah, yeah, true, Jeep Jabba. True, true. But these Dubai people, it will be sunny. Then after the plane flies, the has will appear. Yeah, Yeah, true. But all that is suffering with the environment, with the climate. For you try to make to change climate by force, by your own will, which is which is not good. So we see that large portions of the continent of Africa may become, of course, uninhabited as a result of the rapid effects of climatic change, which would have, of course, disastrous effects on human health, such as floods, food security, and, of course, poverty. By the time rains stop in Kenya, I don't know, people are going to strike. People are going to go out on the streets and strike because people like they are going to be having nothing at all. Everything has been destroyed. So, regional effects of rainfall in the tropics are expected to be much more spatially variable. So, the direction of change at any one location is often less certain. So, we see that surface temperatures have generally increased by almost 1 degree Celsius in Africa since the late 19th century to the early 21st century. In the Sahel, the increase has been as much as 3% degrees Celsius for a minimum temperature at the end of the dry season. So, data for temperature and rainfall shows discrepancies from the norm, both in timing and location. For instance, Kenya has high, of course, vulnerability to the impacts of climatic change now. The main climate hazards include, of course, floods we are seeing today and drought, because it can't rain. It can't rain like that, and you fail to experience drought. Those things work hand in hand. They don't. Those things work hand in hand. It can't just rain like that and it fails to and we fail to see, of course, drought. Um, um, so we see that climate models predict the temperatures to rise from 0.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. The informal urban settlements of Nairobi, the urban heat island effect adds the problem as it creates even warmer ambient temperatures. So this is due to the home construction materials, lack of ventilation, sparse green space, and poor access to electrical power and other services. So, uh, so the issue of climatic change is yet another issue to be discussed in, of course, in African. I don't know. Whenever we see government people coming out to, of course, to become leaders during election time, you can never see someone talking about environment, climatic change stuff. Someone will talk about constructing roads, constructing more industries. Someone may talk about um, pan-Africanism. You know, African presidents, they have used that as a word. Pan-Africanism. Someone, we don't see people talking about climatic change and how to combat climatic change in Africa. I've not seen conferences. We have a lot of ministers in, of course, in African governments, but I've not seen a specific uh, I've not seen any specific department that deals with climate, which is something that is of course terrible, which is something terrible, which is something very terrible. So these climatic conferences only bring restrictions for little man. The corporations always make it out. Yeah, they don't make. Uh, Maybe I don't know whether I'm clear now. I don't know whether sound is clear now. Oh, that's great. So, so these conferences we normally have. Actually, for me, when it comes to climate and other issues, I normally see activists trying to come out and do stuff about climate, and you can never see even these activists on real ground. They're ever in towns rioting, they're ever in towns doing what, but you have never seen them doing acting right. So climatic change in Africa is an increasing serious threat as Africa is among the most vulnerable continents, like I said, to the effects of climatic change. So we see that uh, over the coming decades, like I said, the warming from climatic change is expected across Africa. Greenhouse and gas emissions, these are some of course, the issues that have caused uh, that have caused these climatic changes. So the impact on the natural environment, we see that temperature and weather changes seen. Observed surface temperatures have generally increased over Africa since the late 19th century, like I said. But we see current climatic models predict increases in frequency and intensity of drought and heavy rains as it is in Kenya. So they also predict decreases in, of course, mini precipitation almost everywhere in Africa. So with medium to high confidence. However, local rainfall trends and social climatic interactions are likely to manifest in mixed patterns. Therefore, the converging impacts of climatic change will vary across the continent. In rural areas, rainfall patterns influence water usage. So, climatic change will also increasingly impact Africa due to many factors. So, these impacts are, of course, already being felt and will increase the magnitude if action is not taken to reduce global carbon emissions. The impact include higher temperatures, drought, changing rainfall patterns, and increased climatic, of course, variability. These conditions these conditions have a bearing on energy production and consumption. We see that the recent drought in many African countries, which has been linked to climatic change, adversely affected both energy security and economic growth across the continent. So Africa is going to be one of the regions most impacted by adverse effects of climatic change. Reasons for Africa's, of course, vulnerability are diverse and include low levels of adaptive capacity, poor diffusion of technologies and information relevant to supporting adaptation, and high dependence on agro ecosystem for livelihoods. So, many countries across Africa are classified as least developed countries with poor socioeconomic conditions and, by implication, are faced with particular challenges in responding to impacts of climatic change. So we see that uh, if rain is created, drought is created too. Yeah, correct. That is true. That is true, Jibjaba. If at all someone can create rain, even drought is created. Even drought is created. That is, yeah, and it is created by man. Yeah, drought is created, and the drought creates uh, uh, drought drought is created drought is created by deforestation and other factors. So we see that in 2022, um, over 60,000 respondents from 10 African nations took part in the climatic survey conducted by the European Investment Bank. But the survey found that 88% of the respondents claimed climatic change was hurting their lives, where while 61% of the respondents claimed that environmental destruction has impacted their home, their income, all sorts of livelihood. So these losses are usually the result of severe drought, increasing sea level, or coastal erosion, or extreme weather events like floods or storms. So more than half of the African respondents, of course 57%, said that they, all people they know, have already made steps to adapt to the effects of climate change. But these measures are investments in water saving devices. But with looking at other effects of course of climatic change in, of course, in Africa, we see economic impacts where Africa is warming faster than the rest of the world on average. So large portions of the continent may become uninhabitable as a result of Africa's gross domestic product may decline by 2% as a result um, of 1% degrees Celsius rise in average of world's temperature. So, and by 12% as a result of the 4 degrees Celsius rise in the temperature, crop yields are anticipated to drastically decrease as a result of the rising temperatures, and it is anticipated that the heavy rains would fall more frequently, intensely throughout Africa, increasing the risk of floods that we are going in through right about now. I said you can't do, looking at people in Kenya, they can't do blessings family. Yes, Byron. Hello, Byron. Let me hope you're doing good, Scott. Let me hope you're doing good, but all is well here. We're talking about environmental problems in Africa. The reason actually why we chose this discussion today, it's because of the different things Africa is going through, in, of course, that are related to environment. We are seeing a lot of floods, not only in Kenya. And talking about Kenya, uh, man, man is his own enemy. Who needs the devil? Who needs the devil? Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true, Jib Jabba. And I take this back to the governments in Africa. They look at things that of course justify their family. As long as their families are doing good, as long as their families, their children are studying in expensive schools, they are driving expensive cars, they are living in luxurious homes. All they have to do, all they do is like they don't care. They don't care about the rest of the people, if at all. um in Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania uh, share Lake Victoria. Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania share Lake Victoria. But the part of Lake Victoria in Uganda, uh, time came when, of course, no, I don't, time came actually even up to now, like average people were chased out of the lake. All what the government did, it took the army to the lake to guard the lake. That they don't see any native, any, if at all you uh like they see you on the lake, they cane you, they fall up where you come from, they go destroy your home. That is what the army did used to do. They go destroy your home just because you're fishing from a lake in your country. And To find out, the government had sold off the lake to the Chinese. We would see Chinese fishing, we would see Chinese getting Nile perch, because I no longer see a lot of other fish species in the lake apart from the Nile perch. They want that fish maw from the Nile perch because it is expensive. We see rich people on the lake. So this is what the government does. They had even demarcated the lake. They demarcated the lake into plots of land, into plots of water, into plots of water, which is, and the Chinese, there are places, there are swamps I know about where Chinese have grown rice. When you're heading to my home, they have grown the entire overload. The land is big, and it actually, that land extends to the lake. I know of places, I know of swamps where there are Chinese apartments. They have constructed their industries with apartments in swamps. And whenever it rains, just like it is raining today in Uganda, so roads are swept away by the rains. By the end of this season, they will be renovating those roads. So, um, uh, another, we see that agriculture is, of course, particularly important sector in Africa, and actually, in Africa, we normally say that agriculture is the backbone of Africa. But contributing to the livelihoods and economies across the continent. On average, we see that agriculture in the sub-Saharan Africa contributes to over 15% of the total GDP. Africa's geography makes it particularly vulnerable to climatic change, and 70% of the population rely on the rain-fed agriculture for their livelihoods. So smallholder farms account for 80% of the cultivated lands in sub-Saharan Africa. So we see that we see that cropping system, livestock, and fisheries may be at a greater risk of the pests and diseases as a result of the future climatic change. Crop pests already account for approximately 1/6 of the farm productivity loss in Africa. I remember I remember very well in last season, and that was the December season. I had planted some maize in the village. But before, when actually when the sunshine came, I had to harvest this maize. But I found a lot of pests in the maize. However, I had bought a GMO maize, but I found a lot of pests. We just gave the maize to the pigs. Have pigs. My mom rears pigs. Just gave the maize to the pigs because we wouldn't process for ugali. We wouldn't process that maize for ugali. It had got done with the pests. There were very many. So we see that climatic change will, of course, accelerate the prevalence of pests and diseases and increase the occurrence of highly impactful events. The impacts of climatic change on agriculture production in Africa may have serious implications for food security and livelihoods. As we see that between 2014 and 2018, Africa had the highest levels of food insecurity in the world. For me, whenever I see Africa crying out, African presidents crying out to the World Food Program, we don't have food in our countries, help us with food. Yet Africans, our backbone activity in Africa is agriculture. Or even here in city, even here in Kampala, like you may see someone like doesn't have somewhere to dig, but he's planting some little leaves, some little vegetables within small containers, just because It is within our spirit, it is within our blood for that agricultural love and passion. So, uh, so climate key, of course, variability or change have been, of course, have been and continue to be the principal source of fluctuations in the global food production across Africa across Africa, where production is, of course, highly rain dependent. In Africa, our production is, I see very few people in Uganda and in my village in particular who use irrigation stuff. Agriculture in of course in Africa is mainly and majorly rain dependent. Agriculture depends on rain. If it doesn't rain, we are done. People will talk about famine if it doesn't rain. If it doesn't rain, problem. People will talk about rain. People will talk about people will talk about famine because we majorly our activities, agricultural activities in Africa majorly depend on rain. Sorry, depend on rain. So the agriculture sector is of course sensitive to climatic change or variability, especially the interannual, of course, variability of course, precipitation, temperature patterns, and of course, extreme weather events like droughts and floods. So these climatic events are predicted to increase in the future, and of course, are expected to have significant consequences to the agriculture sector in Africa. So this would have a negative influence on food prices, food security, and land, of course, and land use decisions. Yields from rain-fed agriculture in some African countries could be reduced by up to 50% by, of course, 2050. To prevent the future destructive impact of climatic, of course, change on food production, it is crucial to adjust or suggest possible policies by the governments to cope with increased climatic change. African countries need to build a national legal framework to manage food resources in accordance with the anticipated climatic variability. However, before, of course, devising a policy to cope with the impacts of climatic, of course, change, especially to the agriculture sector, it is, of course, critical to have a clear understanding of how climatic change affects climatic change affects different food crops. This is particularly relevant due to the severe locusts we saw in Uganda during COVID-19. During COVID-19, people were not moving. Now the locusts started eating people's food, and locusts are some of the are some of these are some of insects that are destructive. If they go somewhere, they eat everything. They eat any green thing there. So due to the fact that the reason why these, of course, locusts ate a lot of people's food, and of course the government failed to manage this crisis of locusts in Uganda. Like they didn't know. They had not, of course, studied about this, of course, catastrophe or this kind of situation. They had not studied it very much. They, and funny enough, everything in Uganda is very funny. They carried the army to go and spray the locusts. I was reading news. I was reading news and I was seeing the army carrying sprayers on their backs that they are spraying locusts. And whenever they could go to those places. The locusts could shift at night and go after eating people's crops. So we see that the invasion was, of course, partially attributed to climatic change, the warmer temperature and heavier rainfall, which caused abnormal increase in number of locusts which most of the scientists in Uganda didn't know by that time. So in East Africa, we see that climatic change is, of course, anticipated to intensify the frequency and intensify uh, and intensify of drought and flooding, which can have a diverse impact on agriculture sector. Climate change will, of course, may have varying effects on the agriculture production in East Africa. We see that maize yields in in most of the East African countries, uh, we may get a lot of losses. Now, due to the fact that it is raining too much, maize is going to grow very fast, and we see very many people, uh, of course, harvesting wet maize, raw maize which is not ready. So we see that loss of maize in parts of Ethiopia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania, and northern Uganda. So projections of climatic change are also anticipated to reduce the potential and, of course, the potential of the cultivated land to produce crops for high quality and quantity. So climatic change in Kenya is expected, or is, of course, Kenya is going through climatic change, and of course a lot of impacts on our agriculture sector are yet to be seen in, of course, in Kenya, due to the floods that we are seeing today. Because people were preparing gardens, because whenever African people see rains, they think of gardening. So we see that uh, predominantly rain-fed and thus highly variable to the changes of course, in temperature in Kenya and rainfall patterns, and then extreme weather events. Impacts are likely to particularly pronounced in the arid and semi-arid lands, where livestock production is a key economic and, of course, a livelihood activity. We see that over 70% of the livestock mortality is a result of drought over the next 10 years. So cattle population are at risk or loss because of the extreme temperatures and, of course, rainfalls that we see in Kenya, because we may experience drought. I'm predicting this from my understanding. After these rains that we are seeing in Kenya, we may experience drought, and in big numbers. It may take even 3 months or 4 months. So this is just the beginning of what we are going to go through if at all governments can't watch out what we are going through right about now and do something about it. We may see something more serious and terrible issues than we are seeing today. So climatic change will also exacerbate the vulnerability of agriculture sector in most of the South African countries, which are already limited by the poor infrastructure and a lag in technological inputs and innovation. So maize accounts for nearly half of the cultivated land in Southern Africa, and under the future climatic change, yields could decrease by 30%. So temperatures increases also encourages a widespread of weeds and pests. So climatic change will, of course, significantly affect agriculture in West Africa by increasing the variability in food production, access, and, of course, availability. So higher rainfall intensity, prolonged dry spells, and high temperatures are expected to negatively impact cassava, maize, and bean production in Central Africa. Floods and erosional currents are expected to damage the already limited transportation infrastructure in the region, leading to uh, post-harvest loss post-harvest losses. Exportation of economic crops like coffee and cocoa are on the rise within the region, but these crops are highly variable to climatic change. So conflicts and political instability have, of course, had an impact on agricultural production to the regional GDP, and this impact will be, of course, exacerbated by climatic risks. Africa's gross domestic product, we see that may decline by 2% as a result of the catastrophes that we are going in through. Crop yields are anticipated to drastically decrease as a result of the rising temperatures, because there is no way you're going to plant when the temperatures are high. For me, when I was growing up, by the way, when I was growing up, whenever we could, whenever it could come to of course April, actually before April, those last days of March, we could start making holes where we are going to make seeds, where we are going to plant seeds. We make holes, then after making holes, we put in some manure, organic manure. After putting in some organic manure, then we plant when it is still shining. But maybe my mom was I used to make good predictions. After putting in our seed, we plant our seeds. Then it takes like like when they're like 2 days gone, it starts raining. That's how we used to do it, because in Africa we depend, our crops majorly depend uh, on our crops depend on, of course, on rain. So if at all we are going to, we are still receiving high temperatures in Africa, this is bad news to my fellow Africans. It is extremely bad news to you. So with energy, we see that with increasing population and corresponding energy demand, energy security must be addressed, because energy is crucial for sustainable development. So climatic change has affected energy sectors in Africa, as many countries depend on hydropower generation. Decreasing rainfall levels and droughts have resulted in low water levels in dams, with adverse impacts on hydropower generation. So this has resulted in low electrical energy production, high cost of electricity, and poor outages or load shedding in some African countries that depend on hydroelectric power generation. So disruptions in hydropower generations have negatively affected various sectors in countries such as Uganda, where I'm broadcasting live now, Ghana, Kenya, and Tanzania. So, so we may also experience, however much it is raining now, and I know the water levels are much, and but when it will start raining, it will be another case to it will be another case. It will be another case. We may experience power shortages than we get now. So water scarcity, water quality, and of course availability have deteriorated in most areas of Africa, particularly due to climatic change. Water resources are vulnerable and have the possibility of being strongly impacted by climatic change, with vast, of course, ramifications on human societies. So we see that millions of people in Africa are predicted to, of course, will persistently face increased water stress due to climatic variability and change. So changes in the precipitation patterns directly affect surface runoff and water availability. So climatic change is likely to further exacerbate water stress catchments across Africa. For example, the refugee basin in Tanzania, owing to diversify or land uses and complex socio-political challenges. So Climatic change is a big issue that causes a lot of things. I can't even talk about them now and complete them in 3 hours because it is a big issue. But such issues are not addressed by our governments. People, like even people, like they don't know how climate change, how this game of climate change runs, how to handle, how to monitor, and how to keep. So we may also see health impacts as a result of climatic change in Africa. We see that African countries have the least efficient public health system in the world. So infectious diseases, burdens such as malaria, uh, fever, meningitis, which are, of course, by the way, in Uganda, ever since the rains began, we are having ready eyes. It is so serious in Kampala. Ready eyes, you find people are looking like as if they're from taking weed. Ready eyes. So, which are sensitive to the climatic impacts are highest in the sub-Saharan African region. For instance, over 90% of the annual global malaria cases are in Africa. By the way, changes in climate will affect the spread of infectious agents as and alter people's disposition to these infectious diseases. However much we are seeing a lot of people in Kenya being taken by floods, but let's expect people suffering from malaria. Let's expect people are going to suffer from waterborne diseases. Not in Kenya only, even in Uganda we have the same cases. So climatic change poses a significant threat to the health of tens of millions of Africans as it exposes them to non-optimal temperatures, extreme weather, and an increased range and transmission and transmission rate of infectious diseases. So climatic change and resulting in increased temperatures, storms, droughts, and rising sea levels will affect the incidence and distribution of infectious diseases across the globe. For this, I'm sure I've never seen any superb in African superb that has good toilets. Now look at Kenya. What's going on with Kenya and in Uganda? Now toilets are being swept away. Toilets are being swept away by these rains. Where does that water go? There's people that are walking through this water. So, talking about malaria and climate change, or of course, infectious diseases and malaria in general. In Africa, malaria continues to have a dramatic effects on the population. As climatic change continues, the specific areas likely to experience the year-round high-risk transmission of malaria will shift from coastal West Africa to the area between Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda. By the way, this is a season for sickness. I'm seeing very many people sick. Very many people are sick, so known as the African highlands. We see that limitations like scientific limitations when examining shifting malaria transmission rates in Africa highlands are similar to those related to the broad understanding of the climatic change and malaria, while modeling with the temperature changes shows that there is a relationship between an increase in temperature and an increase in, of course, an increase in temperature and an increase in malaria transmission. So limitations still exist. Future population shifts that affect population density as well as changes in the behavior of mosquitoes can affect transmission rates and are limiting factors in determining the future risk of malaria outbreaks, which also affect planning for collect outbreak response preparations. So with regards to malaria transmission rates in African highlands, factors and exposures resulting from drastic environment changes like warmer climates, shifts in weather patterns, and decreases in the human impacts such as deforestation provide appropriate conditions for malaria transmission between carrier and host. Specifically, malaria is caused by, of course, Plasmodium parasites, which are carried by, of course, vector anopheles mosquito. Even though the Plasmodium parasite can survive in lower temperatures, the Plasmodium parasite will only survive and, replicate in the mosquito when climatic temperatures are above 20 degrees Celsius. So increases in humidity and rain also contribute to the replication and survival of this infectious agent. So exposure of malaria will become a greater risk to humans as a number of female Anopheles mosquitoes infected with either Plasmodium or Falciparum and or Plasmodium vivax parasite increases. We see that studies always show that an overall increase in climatic stability for malaria transmission, resulting in an increase in population at the risk of contracting the disease. Of significant importance is the increase of epidemic potential at higher altitudes, like the African highlands. Rising temperatures in these areas have the potential to change normally um, non-malaria areas to areas with seasonal epidemics. Consequently, new populations will be exposed uh, to the disease, resulting in health year lost. In addition, the disease burden may be more detrimental to areas that lack the ability and resources to effectively respond to such challenges and stresses. So, as climatic change shifts geographic areas of transmission to the African highlands, the challenge will be to find the control the vector in the area that have not seen it before, which is wrong, if I may say. Sub family, yes, and second one, hello brother. Let me hope you're doing good. Let me hope your day is doing fine and good. Me, I'm doing good here. I'm doing good. And second one, for me, I'm doing good. Hi, and second one, this intelligent brother is innocent. Chief Jabba. Intelligent brother. Thank you, Chief Jabba. Okay. We see even more impacts of climatic change on, of course, impacts on conflicts and migration within areas. Because, like for example, we are seeing floods in Kenya today. A lot of people have been displaced. Where are these people going? And where they are going, is it that there are no people in the places where they are going? So we see that post-conflict environmental assessment of Sudan in 2007, we see that Sudan are interlinked with other social, economic, and political issues such as population displacement and competition over natural resources. So, regional climatic change through decreased precipitation was thought to have been one of the factors which contributed to the conflict in Darfur. Along other environmental issues, climate change could negatively affect future developments in Sudan. One of the recommendations I can, or actually one of the things I can recommend, uh, detective chocolate drop with Jabba. So we may experience immediately Not even immediately. We may experience people to like these people who are displaced from areas that are flooded in, of course, different African countries. Where do these people go? And is it that where they go, they don't find people there? We may see conflicts coming out and conflicts coming into civil wars. So talking about the impact of climatic change by region in Africa, talking about Central Africa, we see that Central Africa, for the most part, is landlocked and geographically threatened by climate change. So, due to its high climate, of course, variability and rain fed agriculture, Central Africa is expected to experience longer and more frequent heat waves as well as an increase in wet extremes. So the global mean temperature in this region is to increase about 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. But the carbon dioxide absorbing capacity of forests in the Congo Basin have decreased. This decrease has occurred due to the increasing heat and drought causing decreased tree growth. So this suggests that even unlogged forests are being affected by the climatic change. Where we see that the African jungle will absorb 14% less carbon dioxide than it did from around 2000 and 2010, when people had not become so serious with cutting trees, and will absorb none at all by 2002, by 2035. So, talking about East Africa, we see that situated almost entirely in the tropics. Rainfall in East Africa is dominated by seasonal migration of the tropical rain band. So East Africa is characterized by the high spatial temporal rainfall variability, as it spans over 30 degrees of the latitude. It has influences from both Indian and Atlantic Ocean and has major geographic features in the highlands as well as in inland water bodies such as Lake Victoria. Therefore, the rainfall seasonality varies from the single wet season per year in July to August in parts of the northwest, including Ethiopia and Sudan, which of course are meteorologically more connected to the West Africa, with the West African monsoon bringing the rains to a single wet season per year in December, in December to February in south south over Tanzania, with many areas close to the equator having two rainy seasons per year, approximately in March to May. It is normally between March and May, the long rains. Uh, so, and October to December, the short rains. We expect also rains from October to December, some rain. So, fine scale variability or change in rainfall seasonality is often linked to orography and lakes. Interannual change can be large, and known controls include, of course, variations in the sea surface temperatures of the different ocean basins, large-scale atmospheric modes of course, variability such as the Madden-Julian oscillation, and of course, and also tropical cyclones. So the long rains as the main crop growing season in the region, we see that interannual predictability of the season is low compared to the short rains. And the recent drying contrasts with the climate projections of the wetter future of the East African climate paradox. So East Africa has witnessed frequent and severe droughts in the recent decades, as well as devastating floods, just like we see floods in different East African countries today. But trends in rainfall since the 1980s show general decrease in rainfall between March and May, like I said, that long season of rain. So seasonal rains with a slight increase during June, September, and of course October to December. Other East Africa, so we see that recent studies on climate projections suggest that the average temperature might increase by, of course, 2 to 3 degrees Celsius by the. These numbers seem to be very small to someone, but this is a serious issue. If temperatures rise from 2 to 3, this bad news. Setu, that's right. Good to see you, Setu. Yeah, I'm also happy to see you on second one. But I always see you. I always see you on second one. I always see you. I always see you. I always see you, but that's great. I'm also happy to see you here on second one. I'm also happy to see you on second one. Let me hope you're doing good. Yeah. I hope you're doing fine and good in whatever that you're doing. So, so we see that climate model projections tend to show an increase in rainfall, particularly during the small season or the long seasons we have in Africa, which which is also, of course, projected to occur later. So this delay in the short rain season has been linked to the deepening of the Sahara heat low under the climatic change. So it should be noted, however, that some models predict decreasing rainfall, and for some regions and seasons, are very largest rainfall increases than are, of course, predicted have been shown to involve, of course, impulsive mechanism to the Semitic model areas. Changes of aerosols provide a forcing of rainfall change that is not captured in many assessments of climatic projections. There is time we had a lot of rains here in Uganda. Actually, at the beginning of this year, we don't normally have rainfall in January, February. Rainfall uh, majorly begins in March to May. But in January, it was raining here in Uganda. February, it was raining. I was like, what's happening? What's going on? It was seriously raining. I was like, hey, what's going on? Actually, some people even lied themselves and started planting. By January, they started. Yet the season, the October December season, had not ended. So the contrast, we see that the contrast of the drying trend of the MA or long rainfall is in equatorial East and Africa, with most models, of course, predicting a waiting in the future, has been labeled the East African climate change paradox. So, although there has been some recent, of course, recovery in the rainfalls, we see that drying trend is unlikely to be purely natural, but may be driven by factors such as the aerosols rather than the greenhouse gases. So we see that consistent with the uncertainty in the rainfall projections, changes in the rainfall seasons onset are uncertain in the equatorial East Africa, although many models predict a later and wetter short rains. So the Indian Ocean dipole is known to provide a strong control of the interannual, of course, variability in short rains. But we see climatic, of course, changes in North Africa. We see that climatic change in the Middle East and in North Africa refers to changes in the climatic of the Middle East and, of course, North African region, and the subsequent response. So adaptations and mitigation strategies of countries in the region. Between 2018, the Middle East and North African region emitted 3.2 million a billion tons of carbon dioxide and produced 8.7 global greenhouse gas emissions. So, despite making up only 6% of the global population, the emissions are mostly from the energy sector and integral component of Middle Eastern and Northern African economies due to extensive oil and natural gas reserves that are found within the region. So the region of the Middle East in one of the most, of course, vulnerable to climatic change. The impacts increase in drought conditions, aridity and heat waves, and sea level rise. So sharp global temperature and sea level changes, shifting precipitation patterns, and increased frequency of extreme weather events are some of the main impacts of climatic change, as identified uh, by the Intergovernment Panel of Climate in, of course, in North Africa and Middle East Africa. So we see that the region is, of course, especially vulnerable to such impacts due to its arid and semi-arid environment, facing climatic changes such as low rainfall, high temperatures, and dry soil. The climatic conditions that foster such challenges of the region are projected to worsen throughout the 20th century. So, if greenhouse gas emissions are not significantly reduced, part of the region risks becoming uninhabitable before uh, the year 2030. So, different, of course, African countries experience or undergo these climatic conditions depending, because these are behavioral issues. You misbehave with the environment, you misbehave with the climate, with your misbehavior, shit happens. So we see that in West Africa and the Sahel, the West African region can be divided into four climatic sub-regions, namely the Guinea Coastal, the Sahel, and the Sahel, extending eastwards to the Ethiopian border and the Sahara. So each with different climate conditions, the seasonal cycle of rainfall is mainly driven by the south-north movement of the intertropical, of course, convergence zone, which is characterized by the confluence between moist southwesterly monsoon winds and the dry northeasterly harmattan. So, based on the inter-annual rainfall variability, three main climatic periods have been observed over the Sahel. The wet period from the 1950s to the early 1960s, followed by the dry period from the 1940s for 72 to the 1990, and then the period from 1991 onwards, which has been partially rainfall recovery. So during the period, the Sahel experienced a number of particularly severe drought events with devastating effects. So the recent decades have also witnessed the moderate increment in annual rainfall since the beginning of the 1990s. However, total annual rainfall remains significantly below the observed during the 1950s. So some have identified the two recent decades as a recovery period. Others refer to the period of hydrological intensification, which much of the annual rainfall increases coming from the more severe rain events and sometimes flooding rather than more frequent rains, or similarly other works. So underlining the continuity of course, drought, even though the rainfall has increased since 1985, 54% of the population has been affected by five or more floods in the 17 Sahel regions of Africa. So in 2012, we see that severe drought conditions in the Sahel were reported. So governments in the region responded quickly, launching strategies to address the issue. However, the region is projected to experience changes in the rainfall regime, which climate models suggesting that decreases in the wet season rainfall are more likely in the western Sahel, and increases more likely to the central to the east Sahel. Although opposite trends cannot yet be ruled out, these trends will affect the frequent and, of course, severity of floods, drought, desertification, sand, and dust storms. So, desert locust plagues and water shortages are expected. However, irrespective of the changes in the seasonal mean rain, the most intense storms are expected to become more intense in the Sahel, amplifying food frequency. Enhanced carbon emissions and, of course, global warming may also lead to an increase in dry spells, especially across Guinea coast, associated with the reduction of the wet spells under both 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius global warming level. So 15% of the Sahel region population has also experienced a temperature increase of more than 1 degrees Celsius from 1970 to 2010. So the Sahel region in particular will experience higher average temperatures over the course of this 21st century, and changes in rainfall patterns. So that is the Sahel region, or some of the North African region, those countries that are above the Sahara. So, if at all we don't do something about climate and uh, and about environment, Africa is going to be nowhere in, of course, in a few years to come. If at all we have started experiencing such issues right about now, we see droughts, we see floods, we see wind, we see wind, because there are no trees to of course, break the strength of this wind. So, talking about South Africa, um, uh, for me, to me, governments should adapt measures that are required at multiple scales, ranging from local to national and, of course, regional levels. So the generation of adaptations projections in Africa can be largely, of course, characterized as small scale in nature, focused on target investments in agriculture and diffusing of technologies to support adaptive decisions to combat this effect of climatic change. These are environmental problems Africa is going through, just like our topic was saying today. So that is climatic change. Um, that is climatic change, and how different African countries have been affected, and how Africa is expected to experience more problems related to to climatic change. But of course, there are other problems, environmental problems we see in Africa. There are other environmental problems, like, of course, water scarcity. We see that water scarcity in Africa is, of course, one of other problems that we see. We see that water scarcity is, of course, predicted to reach a dangerously high levels by 2000, by next year, when it is estimated that about two-thirds of the world population may suffer from fresh water shortage. So the main cause of water scarcity in Africa are physical and economic scarcity. So rapid population growth and climatic change, like I was saying earlier. Water scarcity is the lack of fresh water, we know. So lack of fresh water resources to meet the standard water demand. Although the sub-Saharan Africa has, of course, plentiful supply of rainwater, it is seasonal and, of course, unevenly distributed, leading to frequent floods, drought, stuff. So additionally, prevalent economic developments and poverty issues, compound with the rapid population growth and rural urban migrations, has rendered sub-Saharan Africa as the world's poorest and least developed region. So we see that the growing water scarcity is now one of the leading challenges for sustainable development. This is, I guess maybe that's why the Bazungus come in Africa to construct boreholes. They travel off from how many continents? But Africa, by the way, Africa is strategically located. If someone is coming from Europe, from USA, it is very easy to come to Africa. Someone is coming from Asia, it is very easy because Africa is strategically located for everyone to enter, to come at either side. It's strategically located. So we see that this is because increasing number of river basins have reached conditions of water scarcity through the combined demands of agriculture and other sectors. So impacts of water scarcity in Africa range from health, women and children are particularly, of course, affected, to education, agriculture productivity, sustainable development, as well as potential for water conflicts. So another huge uh, another huge environmental problem we see in Africa is, of course, about plastic pollution. Like in other parts of the developing world, plastic pollution is causing widespread problems such as contamination of waterways, disruption of stormwater management, and increases of disease due to mosquitoes and pests living in plastics. So, plastic management is both a combination of cheap supply by all kinds of manufacturers, for example, by providing much needed access to water through bottled water and water circuits, and poor management of the water after use. So some locations in Africa have also been the sourcing of dumping plastic waste from the global north. Some governments are responding, like Rwanda and the continent leads to the rest of the world's plastic ban, which reduced allowed the use of manufacture of single-use plastic such as the plastic bags and food serving tools. So other environmental problems uh, we see we see the issue of there are a lot of issues. We see the issue of oil spills. We see that Africa's top oil producer is Nigeria, where over 3 million liters of crude oil are produced daily and are thought to be the source of 70% of the country's earning. Since petroleum was discovered in Nigeria, more than 60% are uncontrolled. Spills have been a common occurrence in the oil industry. So, the country's main source of GDP, of course, an estimated 240 thousand barrels of crude oil are spilled in the Niger Delta each year, poisoning agriculture, waterways, and atmosphere with hazardous chemicals. So, So over 40 million liters of crude oil are spilled in the Niger Delta each year, killing people and harming the ecosystem. There in the process between 1976 and 2014, the oil-rich region experienced more than 12,000 oil spills occurrences. Uh, so pollution, we see that more than half of them were a result of tanker accidents and pipeline degradation. So we see that the Niger Delta oil spill within 10 kilometers of the mother home increased neonatal mortality rates and negatively impacted the health of uh, mothers living offspring. So oil companies have also been accused of failing to uphold their legal obligation to clean up spills within 24 hours as required by the Nigerian law. So we see that Amnesty International charged Shell and Eni, uh, the two biggest companies in the Niger Delta, of the negligence in how they handled local oil spills. So oil spilling is also another big issue in Nigeria and Africa at large. So this is affecting animals. People are being affected. Sorry guys, this thing that I turned. Okay, okay. This thing I turned off. But let me hope I'm clear, I'm loud and clear. So we see that biodiversity loss, the biodiversity of Africa is crucial to the world. So the continent is the home of to the 22% of the world's mammalian species, nearly a fifth of the avian species, and one-sixth of all plant species. So of the 36 biodiversity hotspots worldwide, 80 are found in the continents. They include numerous endemic species and are the richest and most biological endangered regions globally. So a number of factors including population growth, extensive farming techniques, fast urbanization, infrastructure development, and illegal trafficking are causing the continent to see unprecedented decline in biodiversity. So Intra-governmental science policy platform on biodiversity and ecosystem services singles out Madagascar and the highlands of the Indian Ocean being among the most endangered in Africa. We see that million species are endangered with extinction and many more will be in the coming will be in the coming decades. So by the end of the century, it is predicted that overuse and degradation of the ecosystem will cause the extinction of 20 to 30% of the lake species. I'm saying this in Uganda, like in Lake Victoria, you can no longer find like all fish. Now the dominant fish that we see in Lake Victoria, that is part of Uganda. I've then surveyed the Kenya and of course the Tanzanian part, but we normally see Nile perch dominating the lake. So African bird and mammal species as well as wildlife and fisheries, like I said. So to cope with these challenges, a regional strategy to combat poaching and illegal trade and transportation of wildlife and wildlife, well, of course, products has been developed by numerous countries in East Africa. But we don't see any success in this, or in this, of course. Uh, we don't see any success in these things that have been put down to, of course, combat these stuffs that are happening. I've not seen any success yielded by these people, though They have tried to do something, though something is, but I've not seen any success because we still see such issues happening in big quantities. Um, Africa as a continent, because Africa is very big because it is the second largest and the second most populous continent in the world. We see that we see that the continent is bearing the brunt of climatic change despite of contributing to the just 3% of the total global carbon dioxide emission. But all the things, all whatever that we're seeing is of course attributed to our behaviors, we as human beings, as a sorry, sorry guys, sorry guys, sorry guys for that. Right, but I hope I'm back. So so we like GP Jabba, yeah, it was GP Jabba who said here that we normally have, they normally organize conferences to combat everything that is, to combat what we see, environmental challenges, to combat environmental challenges, but we have not seen that kind. Yeah. Yes, I'm doing. Yes, Jib Jab, I'm doing good. Why? Jib Jab, why? I'm doing good. That's because this thing now has started. This thing of electricity has started its behaviors, its normal behaviors. how it behaves. But I'm doing good, Jibjaba. Why asking that? Whether I'm good or not? Why, Jibjaba? Why asking that? Whether I'm good or not? I'm doing good. I'm doing very good. I'm very